Hello, this is Miss Pat from San Luis Public Library. This week in Science Scouts, we're going to learn how to make our own bouncy ball. Our story for this week is going to be Jamie O'Rourke and the Big Potato by Tomie DePaolo. Jamie O'Rourke was the laziest man in all of Ireland. He would do anything to avoid working, especially if it had to do with growing potatoes. Jamie O'Rourke, his wife Eileen would say, will have nothing to eat this winter if you don't go out and dig up the paddies. Oh, the saints preserve us, Jamie would whine. Me back as sore as can be. Sure as I'm telling you, wife, you'll have to dig them up yourself. I'll break in two if I so much as get up out of this bed. So Eileen, who had done all the planting and watering and weeding anyhow, would go out to the tiny garden and dig up the smallest potatoes in Ireland, all because Jamie was too lazy to dig a larger garden and had no money to buy good potato seed. Then poor Eileen wrenched her back and was laid up in bed. St. Bridget and the Virgin Mary herself must have smiled on Eileen O'Rourke, the village woman said. Why, it's the first rest she's had since she married Jamie O'Rourke. With Eileen in bed, Jamie began to worry. No Eileen to dig meant no paddies all winter, and no paddies meant no food. Oh, dear me, wailed Jamie, I'll starve to death. I'd best go to church and confess to Father O'Malley. There's no telling how soon old death will be knocking on me door. So, even though it was midnight, Jamie set out for the church. He was about halfway down the hill when he heard singing and a tap, 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 tapping sound. Sure, and I wouldn't be knowing, Jamie whispered, but I swear it's a leprechaun. And sure enough, sitting in a circle of ferns in the moonlight was a leprechaun, singing and hammering tiny nails into the heels of the fairy boots that he was making. Jamie knew just what to do. He crept up and grabbed the little man by his coattails and held firm. Let me go, Leprechaun shouted. Not on your life, Jamie said. Not until you show me where you keep your pot of gold. Now everyone in Ireland knows that leprechauns make boots and dancing shoes for the fairies, who pay for them with gold. And everyone knows if you catch a leprechaun, he'll pay for his freedom with his pot of gold. But this leprechaun was cleverer than most. Oh, please, Mr. Mortal Man, I'm just starting out making fairy shoes, and I only have 1 or 2 pieces of gold in my pot. Won't you take a wish instead? Why, what would I wish for, Jamie asked. Me, who's about to die of starvation, because my wife is sick in bed and can't dig the paddies for the winter, and they're such puny paddies anyway. Well, said the leprechaun, reaching into his pocket, you could wish for the biggest paddy in the world. It would last all winter, and you wouldn't have to do anything more than plant this seed, water it, and wait. Oops. That sounded wonderful to Jamie. Done, he shouted, and as the leprechaun dropped the seed into Jamie's hand, Jamie let go of his coattails, and off that leprechaun scampered. When Eileen heard what he had done, she was furious. Jamie O'Rourke, you're not only the laziest man in Ireland, but a fool as well, giving up a pot of gold for a paddy seed. Well, I'm going to plant this seed and water it, and you'll see, Jamie said, and out he went. And faith, Eileen did see. In no time at all, the biggest, finest potato plant had sprouted out of the ground, followed by the potato itself. It was so big it pushed up not only all the dirt in the garden, but the garden shed and the corner of the cottage as well. Well, surely now it's ready to dig, Jamie said proudly. Near the big potato. He hoed all around it, but he couldn't dig that paddy out of the ground. He got a beam and a big rock and tried to pry it out. He pushed and he pushed, but it wouldn't budge. As he was pondering what to do, his neighbors passed by on his way to the village. He couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't wait to tell everyone in the village what he had seen. And before you knew it, the hill up to Jamie's house was filled with villagers coming to see the big potato. Where did you come from? They asked. And Jamie told them about the lucky night he had caught the leprechaun and how smart he had been. Why, anyone could have gotten a pot of gold, he bragged, but the biggest pratie in the world? Well, that took some doing. How ever did you outsmart a leprechaun? They all asked at once. Jamie hesitated and scratched his head. We'll help you dig up your pratie, Jamie, if you'll tell us how you did it. And they grabbed shovels and hoes and started to dig. They dug and they dug and they pushed and they shoved until the potato flew up out of its hole. It rolled down the hill faster and faster until it reached the bottom, where it bounced up high and came to a stop, wedged between the stone walls on either side of the road. What to do now? That pratie is so big that no one, no cart, nothing can get by, the constable complained to Father O'Malley. How is a body to get in or out of the village? What shall we do? The villagers wailed. Then they all looked at Jamie and said, It's your pratie. You'll have to move it out of the way. Well, Eileen spoke up, there's more than enough pratie for everyone. Why don't you all take some? So the villagers sawed and chopped and carted off huge pieces of potato, while Jamie sat on a stone wall and watched. All winter long, everyone had potato to eat, and eat, and eat, until no one wanted to see or hear of potato again. In the spring, Jamie said, I saved a potato eye for a seed, and it's just about time to plant it. No, the villagers all cried. If you promise not to plant it, Jamie, we will promise before St. Patrick and all the saints to see that you and Eileen always have plenty to cook and eat. We don't want another giant pratie around here. Jamie smiled and agreed. What a perfect life for a lazy man. And so you see, darling Eileen, Jamie told her, I wasn't such a fool with that leprechaun after all. And Eileen had to admit that Jamie O'Rourke was right. All right. So today we're going to be making our own bouncy ball, okay? And hopefully it won't be the same shape as that potato, but it will bounce. Hopefully it won't get stuck in between the walls because you're not going to make it that big. So let's find out why the stuff is going to bounce, because what we're going to do is we're going to mix borax and cornstarch and glue and water. That's it, glue and water. So when you guys come into the library, we'll give you the borax and the cornstarch. Hopefully you have glue at home. Doesn't matter what kind, not glue sticks. You need this kind of glue, the liquid glue. And you all have water. And I'll give you a couple of cups that you can mix the stuff up in, or you can do it in a bowl. It's up to you. All right, so this is powder. They both look like powder. Even the borax, it's laundry detergent. So it's white powder and more white powder. How are we going to make a bouncy ball out of that? All right, so let's see. What are they going to do? All right. So when we mix this stuff together, okay, we're going to mix the borax with the water in 1 cup. Okay, and I'm going to tell you to do it in the styrofoam cup because it's going to be hot water. So I want hot water in the styrofoam cup. Don't put the hot water in the plastic cup because that might hurt. In the plastic cup, you can put the glue and the cornstarch. Okay, so you're going to make 2 cups. Then we're going to add the glue to the borax, and it's going to become firm and bouncy. Right? And that's because the borax reacts with the glue. It does a reaction. Right? It's kind of like chemistry. And it's going to cause polymers, or long chains of molecules, which are going to stick together. All right, so what are polymers? All right, so if you guys have ever watched mom or dad cook spaghetti, okay, and they drain the spaghetti, all the water comes out. If you don't put the sauce on right away and you just put it back in the pot, it kind of looks like this stuff here on the side, doesn't it? Right, it kind of all sticks together. But if you put this tomato sauce on it, it kind of keeps gliding over, just like when it was in the water, it glides over it. But when the water's all gone, right, the strands are going to stick to each other. If you wait too long, it kind of becomes rubbery. Now, don't bounce your spaghetti, please. Okay, I don't want to hear from any parents. All right, but the polymers are long strands of molecules, just like the long strands of spaghetti. And they'll slide past each other when it's glue. Okay, so when you put the cornstarch and the glue in here, it still slides. But when you put the borax in, it's kind of like taking the water out, right? And they're going to start making it stick together and stretch. Okay, it'll be a rubbery thing. All right, so why do we need them? So when the glue mixture is added to the borax, it acts as a crosslink. It's going to hook the glue's molecules with the cornstarch molecules, and it's going to help stretch them out. Okay, and the cornstarch is also going to help it hold its shape. And this is kind of a picture. And you kind of see it's a little grainy. They didn't add very hot water. But you're also going to notice that your ball is going to flatten after a while when you leave it in a bag. And I will tell you to put it back in a plastic bag, okay? Because if you leave it out, it's going to dry out and then it's going to crack and fall apart. Okay, it's just going to turn back into powder. So put it back in a plastic bag. It doesn't have to be this one, but put it back in a plastic bag and seal it. And then your thing is going to kind of start to flatten like this blue one here. You can see the slight blue one. All right, so the slight blue one here, right there, you can kind of see starts to flatten, and it'll get flat on one side. All right, and that's because the elasticity causes the ball to return to its shape, and it pushes, right? So when you bounce it, again, the polymers in there are going to help it retain its shape. It's going to flatten when it hits the ground to bounce, and then it's going to go back into its thing. So when it starts to flatten, all you got to do is roll it again. It'll go right back into its shape. Okay, but the polymers help it to absorb the shock because, again, you whale that ball at the ground, and it's going to be a crazy ball, by the way. It's not just going to be a bouncy ball, it's going to be a crazy ball. It's going to bounce all over the place. Okay, not as much as the ones at the store. They're made out of other chemicals. Besides just the cornstarch and the borax, they're made out of other things that are going to really, really make it bounce. But this is going to make it bounce a couple of times. So if you don't get to the store to buy a real crazy ball, or if you're like my grandkids and you lose the crazy balls all the time, right? This is an easy way to make them. Okay. So I put my hot water in here, and I'm going to put my borax in. Okay. And I'm going to stir it. That's what I'm doing. Then in here, I'm going to put my glue. I guess I'm going to have to do it this way. It's just going to take longer. Hoping my glue will come off. It's a problem with glue, right? It doesn't want to come out when you want it to come out. Let's see. Okay, I've got my 2 tablespoons. Nope, these were 2 tablespoons. Yeah, 2 tablespoons of glue. Now I'm going to put my cornstarch in. So you guys can see what we're doing here. stirring this up because if I let it cool down, I'm going to end up with crystals in there. And I'm going to stir my glue and my cornstarch. And you're going to notice it's going to start sticking. Okay, glue and cornstarch kind of start. Then all of it. All right. Then what I got to do is I have to mix my borax, my glue. I don't have any more crystals in here because I have hot water. Remember, it has to be very hot, so do this with your parents, okay? Now I'm just going to add a little at a time. Oh, and I know what I did forget because I wanted to do this for St. Patrick's Day. You can put this into the glue stuff before you add the borax. You can do it after it. But I would definitely do it while you're using something to stir it and not your hand, because otherwise your hands are going to turn green and you're going to look like the Hulk. Okay, so I want to show you what it's turning into. You'll kind of see a lot of liquid still in here. Okay, but I'm going to fish it out with my fork. Okay. And now I'm going to kind of squeeze out a little extra water here. And we're going to kind of keep mushing it. And the good thing is, if it's really too wet, I'm just going to let it sit outside for a little while. You're not going to let it, and I don't mean outside. I just mean don't put it in a plastic bag right now because it's a little too wet. So I'm definitely not going to be able to bounce this right now because it's very, very, very wet. And I will end up with water puddles all over the place. Okay. But now I have my bouncy ball. Okay. Now, I just want to show you guys. See what it's doing? Okay. But it's kind of like clay, and I can kind of keep mushing it back together right now because it's still wet. Now, if yours starts to flatten because you put it in the bag and you can't get it to go back into a ball, add a little water to it, warm water. Don't put it in the microwave, but add a little warm water to it so that it gets really gooey like this again. Then just roll your ball. Okay, now if you were outside, you could bounce this. I'm inside, I really can't bounce this, okay? I'm gonna try. Let's see. I do want you to see that it is kind of like a ball. Now, if you don't want a big ball like this, then before you mix the two things together, right, you can tear it apart and you can probably make two balls. All right, I'm going to mix this back in my water because it's now a little bit drier. All right. But now I got enough to make two balls. Right? And that's what you guys will have. You'll have enough to make a couple of balls if you want, or you can make one really big ball. Okay. If you want to make different colors, split it up and then add the colors. Okay. Because if you add orange and green together, you're probably going to end up with a brown color. Then it'll look like that bouncing potato in the potato story, in Jamie O'Rourke's story, right? So now I have one ball. Now this one, obviously, he's not going to bounce too well. Okay? He's not perfectly round either. But I'm going to add this one back to my water. And I'm going to, again, mush, mush, right? like making clay, right? And you've all made clay balls before, right? And you can do it in your hands, or you can do it on the table, all right? Add glitter to it, and I got my little bouncy ball. Okay, I've got 2 of them, and they're not anywhere near as big as Jamie O'Rourke's potato, right? All right, so have a happy St. Patrick's Day. Sorry about that. I think I just paused it. Got a little glitch there. Right. Have fun with your balls. You can make any color you want. You got the whole summer to play. All right. See you guys next week. Bye.